Good morning and welcome to the daily cyber briefing for Wednesday, the 22nd of October. I'm Stephen Ridgway. TP-Link has patched 4 Omada gateway flaws, 2 of which allow remote code execution. So the CVEs are CVE 2025-6541, 6542, 2025-7850 and 7851. So in fact, it looks like 3 of them are command injection vulnerabilities, and the last one is an improper privilege management vulnerability. There's a long list of devices that are impacted by this, so I'm not going to read out all the numbers. You can look them up in the article that we will link to the briefing. But if you're using TP Omada gateways, strongly recommend you have a quick check of these and then apply patches ASAP. There's no indication at the moment that these are being actively exploited, or at least not actively exploited to any great scale. But given the nature of the fact that it's a gateway, I would strongly recommend that you don't wait to see whether this is one of the commonly exploited sets of vulnerabilities or not. Just get them patched and get yourself safe. Okay, there's an interesting article in GB Hackers I came across this morning talking about how adversarial groups are using OAuth apps to maintain cloud access even after password resets. So the concept, it's quite a long article, it's quite in depth, very interesting article. I'm not going to go through all of it. If this is something you're interested in, definitely recommend a read of this article. But the concept is basically it's possible to take over an account, right? We know the basic methods of doing that, various combinations of things, phishing, just hijack user accounts. There are multiple ways of hijacking user accounts. So what is interesting is that for the majority of those account hijacks, once you've got control of the account again, one way or another, administrators can reset passwords, those sorts of things. So it's possible to recover access of accounts, generally, not always, which would then mean that the attacker would have to continually maintain, do something active to maintain access to the accounts. Well, one of the things that they can do is create an OAuth app. Now, it's especially applicable to organizations that use Microsoft Entra ID, because Microsoft Entra ID has concepts of what they call second-party applications and third-party applications, and they apply different levels of security to those applications. So third-party applications are the obvious stuff. Slack needs access to your Office 365 account in order for you to log into your Slack workspace using your corporate Office 365 account, those sorts of things. Zoom and DocuSign and all these other things that integrate with they integrate with authentication and are seen as third-party applications. So the application is considered to be external to the tenant and is therefore subject to fairly rigorous checks and balances around what it can do and how it does it. Second-party applications, though, are what are considered, I think, those of us with long grey beards would consider those to be traditionally internal applications. So these are things that are developed by people who've got a legitimate reason to be working and generating apps within an environment, and they're treated in a different way because their origin is what's seen by the tenant as being legitimate and authorized within that particular tenant. So if the attacker can compromise an account and create an OAuth app, okay, it doesn't matter if there are changes to the user's password or implementing MFA or whatever it may be, because the app itself uses tokens and keys to authenticate, rather than going back and reusing the credentials of the account that created the app. Now, it's kind of obvious when you think about it. We've always done it this way. If you're developing an app, the app runs in the context of something, and it shouldn't really be in the context of the user, probably because the user has the wrong rights and privileges, and also because you want user authentication to be specific for users. You don't want non-human entities, as the security team at a finance company I used to work for used to call them. So things like applications or service accounts, those sorts of things. You need the applications to run in a different context to the user that wrote and published the app. Well, in the good old days, you would create a service account and it would run in the context of a service account, and then you had control over the password of the service account. These days, apps, especially cloud apps, are using tokens or keys or some form of PKI in order to authenticate themselves, which means that even if you recover access to the user account, the application continues to run. And if it's a malicious application or an application that allows for the attacker to regain access to the environment, that will continue to run. So it's an interesting nuance, and because they're seen as second-party applications, not third-party applications, the levels of security checks, balances, and controls that are put in place for them is more limited. So what can you do about this sort of stuff? Well, the key thing you can do about this is regularly audit applications that are running across your tenant, and make sure that you understand why they're running and where they've originated from. And specifically, if you are concerned that an account may have been compromised, go back and look to see whether there are any applications that have been created by that account that may be running in a context that isn't using that user account's credentials in order to authenticate. So have a look. So basically, it comes back down to visibility again. Make sure that you understand what's going on. Make sure you're on top of it. So yeah, very interesting article. Strongly recommend a read of that, even if you're not using Microsoft Entra ID. The concept will be similar for various other OAuth, in various other OAuth environments. So definitely worth having a look at that one. And then finally from me today, just a quick heads up that recent Windows updates are causing login issues on some PCs. So Microsoft's confirmed that Windows updates released since August the 29th this year are breaking authentication on systems that are sharing security identifiers. So security identifiers, SIDs, they identify machines, they identify user accounts and so on and so forth, and they're used to track and manage user accounts and groups and computer accounts and all these sorts of things. And they were, the concept originally from Microsoft was that they should be unique. The idea being that you can then apply various configuration or control or whatever aspects to specific or users or devices or groups or whatever it may be. And it's the SID, which is actually the identifier that's used in the background to work out what's going on, who is who and what is what. So I want to say that sort of operating system stuff for access control, permission management, security auditing, and so on and so forth. So rather than relying on account names, which is why you can change an account name, but without breaking all of the rights and privileges that that account may have. That's what's going on. Now, the issue is because these things are meant to be unique, and Microsoft has been tightening up on what do you do under strange or anomalous circumstances. One of the things they've tightened up on is duplicate SIDs. Well, a good question is, how do you end up with a duplicate SID? Because you don't create these. When you create an account or you build a machine or whatever it may be, or you create a security group or whatever aspect of Windows you're working on at any particular time, they never ask you for a SID. It just happens in the background. Well, the common reason why you end up with duplicate SIDs is because you're working in a virtualization environment where you've got effectively a golden image, or whatever the latest trendy word is for golden image, which is then used to spawn multiple other devices that come with all of the, they've got their device SIDs, but they'll also be in, they may have specific local accounts. There's all sorts of things that could be spawned as part of creating a virtual machine off a golden image. If you haven't prepped if you haven't prepped each individual instance properly before it's let loose onto your into your Microsoft AD world, you end up with the SIDs being duplicated. You end up with a bunch of machines that share the same SIDs as the golden image. So if you literally just clone it, so this has been a well-known problem for, I was something that the virtualization team that used to work for me years ago were developing, ensure things were properly tidied up, because it isn't just the Microsoft stuff is relatively easy to tidy up, but you get the equivalent of SIDs, but you get UIDs for all sorts of things, in instances of antivirus, anything which has got a by instance or by user license. You don't want duplicate IDs, because those can screw with the functionality of whatever it might be. So there's a whole concept of how do you clean up a new instance before it can then be initiated and put onto the network as something that's actually working. So just be aware that if your processes for cleaning up virtual images that have been spawned from a golden image, if that process isn't solid, you may be getting login attempt fails, or login failed, network credentials didn't work, or there are partial mismatch in machine IDs, or simply username or password is incorrect. Issues. If you are seeing those things and you're scratching your heads a bit, it may well be that you've been hit by this particular problem. So article in Bleeping Computer will link to the briefing, but it does link out to what you can do in order to resolve these issues. So that's all from me for today. I hope you have a good Wednesday, and I'll speak to you all again tomorrow morning.